Just because your marriage is real does not mean that USCIS will automatically believe it. There are certain facts, patterns, and missing documents that can make USCIS officer take a much closer look at your case. Marriage-based green cards are some of the most common immigration cases, but they are also heavily criticized and scrutinized because USCIS is trained to look for fraud. The current USCIS as we know it is not an adjudication machine. They are not looking to approve the case. They are looking to find a way to deny it. And fraud in marriage-based cases are the fastest way for USCIS to deny a case. So in this video, I am going to walk through the red flags that can trigger extra questions, requests for evidence, interviews, home visits, or even denials. I am Attorney Lilian Chukwurah, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. A red flag does not mean that your case is doomed. It does mean that you need to be very intentional on how you present your evidence and your story about your relationship. A red flag requires more from you than if your case did not have a red flag. However, a red flag does not automatically mean that your case will be denied. It just means you have to do more work on your end to get that case approved. It's important to note that these red flags are in no particular order. This is how I wrote it down, okay? So they are no in particular order. The first one is short dating history or a quick marriage. So if there's a short time between the time you met to your marriage to filing for a green card, that is going to raise a red flag because are you only getting married so that you can apply for a green card? Is there a relationship there that has been built over time? These are questions that any reasonable person will have if there's a short time between the time you met and the time you got married. A very short dating history, a quick marriage is always going to raise some red flags. And you know this, if your friend comes and tells you, I've only known someone for a month and we went and got married, are you going to be like, yay, congratulations? Or are you going to have more questions? And 9 times out of 10, you're going to have more questions. So think about it that way. USCIS is not saying that your marriage cannot be real just because it's a short or a quick marriage, but they just want to know more. They have more questions for you. When you are in this situation where you do have this red flag, one thing you need to focus on is the quality of the evidence that you're providing. Evidence that shows the progression of your relationship. These are where text messages actually come in handy because it can show when you first started talking, how it progressed over time to you two deciding to get married and getting married. All of those things can, if you text each other, can be visible in your text messages, so you can use that as evidence of the relationship to show that progression, even though time-wise it seems quick, but the actual communication is deep, so the USCIS officer can actually see the development of the relationship. The second red flag is a big age gap, cultural difference, or language barriers, okay? I'm lumping these 3 together because they do have a similar effect. So when there's a big age gap, the USCIS officer is always going to be on alert. Like, is this marriage real? Is the younger person trying to use the older person for a green card? Especially, again, if the younger person is the one that is applying for the green card, okay? Depending on the country you're from, there may be major cultural differences that are significant, okay? Think a Muslim marrying a Christian in certain countries, how that can have an effect. So those kind of cultural differences, language barriers, how are you communicating with your spouse if you two do not speak the same language? right? These are questions. Remember, the red flags are questions. They raise questions. You need to make sure that your evidence gives the officer the answers. Okay, if you have an interview, you need to make sure you're giving the officer the answers to this question. I have had clients where they did not speak the same language. They went to the interview with an interpreter and they were still approved. Why? Because they were able to show how they communicate. All right, WhatsApp, because there's a translate, right? You can then put it in a translate. They are able to show how they communicate, and that is enough for the officer. If you can show you can actually communicate despite the language difference, that's amazing, right? That's something you can use to show your relationship. The cultural differences. How are you getting past that cultural difference? How's the family feeling about it? Being prepared to answer those types of questions. And then when it comes to the age gap, you know, are they interested in having children? What is the, communication that has happened when it comes to having children? These are important things that the office is going to kind of zoom in on. It's important to note here that the age gap and the language difference and the cultural difference is not the issue here. The issue is whether you can show by your evidence that you two have a real shared life together. Are you building a life together? Are you moving through the world as a couple? That's what USCIS is going to be looking for in your evidence. Red flag number 3 is when a married couple are living separately, okay? There are common legitimate reasons to live separately, but this is a major red flag when you say you and your spouse are in love and both of you are living in the United States, but you're living in separate states, separate cities, or even you're living in the same city, but separate housing. Red flags, right? Now, what are legitimate reasons for this? Working, right? If your spouse has a job that takes them out of state a lot and now they have to get an apartment out of state to make that job work, that's fine. School, right? If one spouse is currently enrolled in school and is not able to be traveling back and forth, that's reasonable. Financial reasons, immigration status. So if they're not able to move to another state because of their immigration status, if they do not have the funds to travel to another state, you have to be able to explain to the officer why you're living separately, and the reason has to be legitimate, right? You can't just say, oh, we don't like sharing a space together. Okay, cool. But it raises a red flag. How are you maintaining your relationship if you're not living together? How is USCIS objectively supposed to know that your relationship is real if you are not living together? Okay. In the real world, right? I always tell people this. In the real world, couples live apart all the time. Okay? That is a thing that happens. Couples have separate bedrooms. Couples have separate houses. That is normal in the real world. In the immigration world, it is not normal, right? USCIS is not going to see that as normal. So you need to be able to explain, that you two travel to see each other a lot, that, you still have shared financial responsibilities. You are communicating all the time. You have attempted to get a lease together and it just never worked out. That you do have plans on living together. Maybe you have a contract job and that job is ending at a certain date and you know that for a fact. So, once that job ends, you are going to be moving in with your spouse. Or once your school ends, you're going to be moving in with your spouse. You need to have a plan in place. Red flag number 4 is prior immigration problems. This can be anything from a visa overstay, prior denials, prior marriage petitions. This is a huge one. Prior marriage petitions that were denied can have a major negative impact on your case. So this has nothing to do with the actual relationship between you and your current spouse. It has to do with you and your prior spouse, but it can come and haunt you in your current relationship. So you need to have that conversation with your spouse. Hey, by the way, I was denied in the past. This is the reason we were denied, and it can potentially be a problem. This is where you're having conversations with your immigration lawyer, pulling your file to see exactly what was in that. Why was it denied? What was the reason given? Can we get evidence today to overcome those reasons so that when you file and those things come up, you have the evidence to back up your position? So just remember, sometimes the problem is not your marriage, right? USCIS thinks your marriage is perfect. The problem is the immigration history attached to the person applying for the status. Okay, it's really important to note that, because let me tell you how many times I have had to tell people, hey, you're most likely going to be denied because you had a marriage fraud finding on your prior case. And it's going to be hard to overcome that marriage fraud finding, especially if you are telling me that you do not have any other evidence to come to say that that marriage was real. So it's really important that we pay attention to that. Red flag number 5 is weak financial and household evidence. This is evidence that shows your life together, that you and your spouse are building a life together, such as a joint lease or mortgage, a joint bank account, joint insurance, taxes together, utility bills, emergency contacts, children together, travel, things like that. That is what USCIS is looking for evidence of your shared life together, your shared financial life together, including financial responsibilities, right? So you want to make sure that if you do have these evidence in place, that you are including it with your application. And if you do not, you may need to just look at your life and think about where in your life you are sharing those financial responsibilities. Do you have a joint credit card, right? Did you add your spouse as an authorized user on your credit card? You can use that as evidence of your relationship. So it's really important that you realize that pictures alone are not enough. It's important to note that, again, not every couple is going to have every type of evidence, but you should be able to explain what you do have and what you don't have, right? So if you do not have a joint bank account, why don't you have a joint bank account? Most of my clients that do not have a joint bank account is typically because a bank needs a social security number. And if the person that's applying for the green card does not have a social security number, the chances of you being able to get a bank account together is 0, okay? In most states, it is 0, unless you find out one bank that's willing to do it. Most of my people have not been able to find it, and USCIS has not had an issue with that. So it's really important that whatever the red flag is, as always, what is the explanation? What is the reason that you don't have that, or the reason that you do have it? Okay. Red flag number 6, inconsistent answers or forms. Remember, when you are telling USCIS about your relationship at your interview, remember that they have the forms where you filled in information about you and your spouse. Remember that you are sending them pictures of your wedding. Remember that you are sending them maybe the invitation to your wedding. All of those things are information that USCIS can use to confirm your story. So whatever you are telling USCIS, just know the evidence that you're including is also part of that story. So every single part of your story, from what you're saying at the interview to what documents you submit as evidence to what you put in your forms, all of those are part of your story, and USCIS will be looking for all of those things to be consistent. And if they are not consistent, they can raise major red flags. So inconsistencies are major. And some common inconsistencies to watch out for are dates of meeting, dates of marriage, those things important, okay? If you go into the interview and spouse A says you two met in April of 2025, spouse B says you two met in, June of 2025, those are inconsistent answers, and those answers are going to raise red flags for the officer. Addresses. Are you consistent with your address history? Employment history, prior marriages. You know you have to disclose those, right? It's not a question, it's on the form. The form says you have to disclose your prior marriages. The form says you have to disclose all your children, including step children. Okay? Your immigration history, the forms ask about that. If you have ever been in deportation proceedings and you forget to put that on your application, major red flag, right? Why are you trying to hide this? So USCIS is not looking at just your photos. They are comparing your forms, your documents, your testimony, and sometimes your prior immigration records to make sure that everything is consistent. So when clients come to me and they're like, oh yeah, I filed something in 1990. I don't really remember what I filed, but I know I filed something. My first step is not to start doing their green card application. My first step is to get their immigration file, because that's going to tell me what they actually filed for, and if we need to worry about some misrepresentation that happened in that prior filing, if we need to worry about some information that was, incorrect or was not fully disclosed to USCIS. I need to know all of that before we file the green card application so that my client is prepared for the interview when those things come up, and to make sure that the forms are accurate. Okay, so that's why it's a full picture when we're working on these cases. Red flag number 7 is when one of the spouses is not involved in the process. USCIS can kind of detect when one spouse seems more on it than the other one. When you are the US citizen spouse and you're in that interview acting very nonchalant, like you don't even want to be there, you're not answering the questions, you can't answer questions about, how much did you pay your attorney? How much is your process? When did you file your application? That's when those questions start coming up. When the officer is like, it doesn't look like you two are on the same page, or that you two are participating in this process. So, and remember, the US citizen or permanent resident is the one filing the I-130. So if they are not involved in the process, USCIS is going to question the whole relationship. So examples of where this comes up is if the US citizen or permanent resident does not attend the interview. Huge red flags. If they do not know basic facts about the applicant, if you two don't know basic facts about each other, period, that's red flags. If the US citizen or permanent resident cannot tell the officer information about the documents that were presented in the case. So for example, if there's bank statements and they don't know what the charges on the bank statements are, and there's like major purchases on the bank statement and they don't know anything about it, red flag, okay? If they are in the interview and they refuse to participate, red flag. And if they threaten to withdraw the case, red flag, right? USCIS is going to be like, what is going on here? Is this relationship real? Did something happen? Because if the relationship has broken down and you two are getting a divorce, USCIS is not going to approve that case. Just know that. So it is really important to be on the same page for your interview and for both people to be invested in the process. So one of the things that I offer my clients to help them feel more confident and comfortable going into the interview is a mock interview. And I've been offering this to people outside of my client, full service clients, because I know how important the interview is. It is literally your last step before your officer is making a decision on your case. So you want to make sure that you're feeling confident and comfortable going into it. You know what type of questions to expect. You know what the red flags in your case can be and how to react to them. So definitely doing a mock interview is a great place to start if you are already in the process and you just want to feel more confident moving forward. If you would like that, feel free to reach out to me. Now, I know I just gave you 7 red flags, but I want you to know this. The best way to deal with the red flag is not to hide it, right? Don't hide it from them. It is important that you identify them early, explain them clearly, and support your explanation with evidence, okay? USCIS is going to look at your case and see there's an age gap, right? They're going to look at your case and see that, oh, there were previous applications denied. You don't want to hide anything by checking boxes saying that you've never had any immigration violations. No, you did. It's okay to say that you did, but you need to also have an explanation backed up with evidence. So yes, there's a red flag, but what can you provide to overcome that red flag, to put your best foot forward and give yourself the best chance of actually getting your case approved? Knowing about the red flags is going to make your case stronger because you are now going to be able to look at your case from the lens of the officer and see like, okay, these are the red flags the officer is going to see. What are the things I can provide to the officer to make them not see these red flags as an issue? That's what you want to do. If you are preparing your marriage-based green card case and you are worried that you may have red flags in your packet, we offer immigration packet reviews and packet preparation services. We can review what you have, identify the issues, and give you a clear plan before you file your application. If you would like to take advantage of any of our services, please feel free to schedule a private consultation with me. Let's talk about your situation, figure out what services will work best for you, and the steps that we can take to make your immigration dreams come true. If you would like to do that, go to my website, lilylegal.com, click on Contact Us, and you'll be able to schedule a date and time that works best for you for us to talk about your case.